host, Savannah.
And Kaylin.
So, we're going to dive right into our first segment, Beyond the Headlines. Today, we're tackling an urgent and critical topic, climate change and global warming. We'll explore what they mean, their impact on the planet, and most importantly, how we can adapt to this changing environment. Climate change refers to long-term alterations in Earth's climate patterns, which have been influenced by human activities. Global warming, on the other hand, specifically refers to the rising average temperatures on Earth due to increased greenhouse gas emissions. Which I didn't know that. I didn't know it had anything to do with gas or anything like that.
Yeah. But as
Um,
you were raised that it's not real.
oh yeah, my parents and my church that I grew up in, which we'll get more into that in a future episode,
Yeah.
um, they pretty much taught me that global warming isn't real, climate change isn't real, so we don't need to worry about it. But now that I'm out of that and I'm in the real world, I'm learning it's very real and it's a huge threat right now. So that's why we're making
Yeah.
this video to educate everyone on it.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
just like we said for global warming, it's due to increased greenhouse gas emissions. Well, what are greenhouse gases? Well, greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, CO2, it traps heat in the atmosphere, leading to a gradual increase in our planet's temperature.
Right.
This warming triggers various environmental changes with far-reaching consequences.
Right.
So, now that we know what climate change and global warming are, what is the impact of climate change?
Right.
Well, it's happening right now. It's evident in rising sea levels, more frequent severe weather events like hurricanes, wildfires, disruptions to ecosystems, and the melting of polar ice. It affects
Yeah.
agriculture, water resources, and it can exacerbate poverty and food insecurity. The
Mm-hmm.
consequences of climate change are felt globally and require immediate attention and action from individuals, communities, and government.
Right.
So, now that we got this little educational background, Kaylin is going to talk a little bit about some stats and how we can adapt to this.
Yes, just diving a little deeper based off of what you were saying. So first, what I want to show you guys before I talk a little bit more about this subject is actually a chart. So, what we're looking at is a chart created by Professor Elliot Jacobson. It is the North Atlantic sea surface temperature anomaly for over the years. So it's the temperature differences. And if you look at the red line, you'll see the years between 1991 and 2020. And he explains that multiple times within the past couple months, he's had to extend the y axis on this chart
Wow.
to be able to mark our temperature rises because it is literally off the charts.
That's crazy. And I mean, there's been a huge increase. And I know, I told you, I went scalloping this past weekend, and it was in the Gulf of Mexico in Florida.
Yeah.
And the water was not much hotter than out of the water in the sun.
So that's one of the things I was actually going to mention is our temperatures in our waters right now in Florida have reached well above 100 degrees and are being compared to hot tubs.
Oh my God. No wonder
So
it didn't
not
feel very cooling.
only were you getting sun poisoning by being in the sun for a long period of time, you were literally boiling in water for hours.
Gotta love it.
So be careful out there. If you're going to the beach, if you're in the pool sometimes, even, like those temperatures are freaking insane. So the next point I wanted to bring up was heat waves in Europe killed more than 61,600 people last summer. So
61,000.
61,000.
Heat.
Almost 62,000 basically. And that's
What?
last
Oh my
summer.
God. Not even this
Now,
summer.
right. But with that being said, I am going to explain a little bit about our natural reoccurring weather patterns so you can understand that not only is this heat coming from climate change, it is also a natural weather pattern, but that's actually kind of making our situation worse if you look at it that way.
Mhm.
Because what it's called is the El Nino Southern Oscillation, aka ENSO. Now, there's two segments basically within this oscillation weather pattern yearly. It's the El Nino and that
Okay.
is the warm weather patterns. And then there's La Nina, which is like our cold weather patterns. Um, this period, I'm not exactly sure how often it happens, but when it does happen, it lasts for about 2 to 7 years. So, what that can mean, and we're just now entering it, is that from this point forward, for 2 to 7 years, it's going to continually get warmer without cooling down.
Great.
So, there's two ways to approach and address global warming. That's mitigation and adaptation. You've
Yeah.
explained a little bit of the mitigation part. You know, there's certain things we can do it as a society to try to slow this down. Um, a lot of it's out of our controls, unfortunately. However, I did want to point out that I was watching this show on Netflix. I've mentioned it in the past, but it's called The Future of. One of the episodes that I watched was actually about skyscrapers that they're building. And I
Okay.
mentioned this when we talked about the Montauk experiments, but companies are looking at better materials to build buildings and specifically skyscrapers
Okay.
that are more environmentally friendly because those materials are one of the biggest reasons that we're experiencing global warming. I mean, or climate change, I should say. I also seen that companies are making clothes that are more environmentally friendly,
Yeah.
which I'm super excited about, and I hope that they have plus size options. Because
Same.
as of right now, us plus size girls are stuck with either torrid or fast fashion, and that's not many options. And we'll talk about that in a further episode more. But I didn't realize that our clothes, when we wash them, have tiny plastic particles that release into the environment every time we wash them.
I didn't know that either.
I learned
Yikes.
from the show.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's why one of the reasons I found the show so interesting because they talk about what we're looking at now, what we can expect from the future, and like ways we can change it and ways that they are progressively working towards changing it.
So is that
You know,
all fashion or clothing, or
fast
is it
fashion mainly.
okay?
It's clothing that has materials like polyester,
Mm,
those type of materials, which nowadays you're finding them more frequently, not just
yeah.
in fast fashion, unfortunately.
Right.
One thing that I seen a lot is that scientists have not given up.
Yeah.
So that's a reason to be a little less stressed. Once
It's
our
very
scientists have
reassuring.
given up, then that's
Yeah.
stressful for real. But
It's
here's some
definitely
things we
reassuring
should,
though.
yes,
Oh,
very
sorry.
reassuring because we need that a little bit in these times.
Mm,
Because as a person of society, it's just like you feel helpless, you know?
yeah.
But these are the things we should be preparing to adapt for. Now, you did mention a few of them. Higher temps. You can stock up on water, buy sun resistant clothing if possible. Now's an era where we all need to start learning to make our own clothes. That's a suggestion I
Mm,
have. If you're
mm-hmm.
looking to pick up a new hobby, try to learn how to make some clothes that can withstand long periods of time, something light that's not too hot. Stay indoors if possible. Try not to be outdoors for long periods of time in this heat because heat stroke is real and it is affecting people today.
It's dangerous at this
It's
point.
very dangerous.
It's not like every
No.
other summer we've had in the past. It's different at this
This is
point.
the highest heats we've ever recorded in history. Not saying
Hmm.
it's the highest heats because we didn't start recording our weather, you know,
Yeah.
at the beginning of time, but as we know of, this is the highest heat so far. Another thing to prepare for is extremely high humidity rates. A lot of people don't
Mm,
think about that in the long term. Dehumidifiers, fans. I know money, it takes money, but if you can, these are things, if you're going to invest in something, these are the things you should be investing for this. House plants lower humidity. If you don't have money for a dehumidifier, or even if you do, that's something that can help. Um, Stay very hydrated. I can't stress enough. Like, prepare,
mhm.
stock water. You need water. At the end of the day, as long as you have water, you can survive.
Which I have a recommendation. Like Kaylin said, when I went scalloping this past weekend, I got sun poisoning and severely sunburnt because, I'm pale. It's what happens.
Same girl.
And I was trying to stay hydrated, but, the hydration was just like crawling out of my body at a rapid pace. And so,
You were like
so
SpongeBob when he didn't have water anymore.
Literally. So I was like, okay, Gatorade isn't doing it, coconut water isn't doing it. What's gonna do it? So I found this drink called BioLite. And
Yes.
it's apparently it gives you the same amount of electrolytes and hydration as an IV bag from the hospital.
And we're not sponsored, but we could be. Hit us up.
Mhm. Sponsors BioLite. We live in Florida.
Right.
But honestly, though, I drank two of them that day and I woke up feeling amazing. And my sunburn was almost completely gone. I was hydrated again. I had energy.
Yes.
So,
You're
highly
gonna be
recommend
out and
if y'all,
about.
yeah, grab one of those BioLites. You could get them on Amazon. I think I got
Yeah.
mine from Publix. So, there's
Yeah,
a
you
lot
can
of
get them
places
in
you can,
like stores, some gas stations, I think, even.
yeah. And if you can't do that, coconut water is another great option. That's
Yeah,
not
or
just
just
water.
water. At the end of the day, just drink some water, add some lemon, add some cucumber if you want to get fancy with it. Just make sure you have your water as I drink my iced coffee, you know. I haven't had lunch, but
Protein shake.
another thing that you mentioned is food and water shortages. That's something we need to be preparing for. And as like any prepper will tell you, no matter what you're prepping for, that's the basics. Food and
Yeah.
water. But crops aren't growing right now. I'm sure you've noticed already there's a shortage of meat in the grocery stores.
Yeah.
We'll talk about more in another episode, but lab grown meat is now a thing, so that should tell you enough.
Hmm.
If you can grow food, not everyone is in that situation where they can, unfortunately, like myself. I want to be. But if you can, take advantage of it. If you have land, take advantage of it.
Yeah.
If not ever now, needs to be the
Yeah.
time.
And even if
Um,
you don't have a lot of land, you can always do like a mini garden. Like I
yeah,
have
like
one,
herbs and veggies, you know.
yeah. I have one and it's in one of those, what are those things called? Galvanized tubs. It's in a
Yes.
big round galvanized tub and it's filled with soil and rocks to help, the water penetrate deeper. And I think I'm growing like
Right.
basil, mint, strawberries. So you can do things like that. You can grow small
Yes.
veggies. You can put it in like a more portable area instead of just in
Right.
the ground.
Try
Because I
to
know in
stock up on
Florida,
canned stuff.
yeah,
You
for
know,
sure.
oats
Yeah.
or is my favorite thing to prep with because like I could probably eat
Mhm.
overnight oats if I had to for a good minute.
And it's cheap. It's
They're
so
cheap.
cheap. And you can find it
Yeah, don't go
anywhere.
spending all of your savings on it, but do what you can. When you go grocery shopping, buy a couple more little things. And
Yes.
just slowly add up over time. That's the best thing you can do, you know. Also
Hmm.
preparing for bad storms, hurricanes, floods,
Hmm.
blizzards, um, just all of that stuff. That's gonna become worse and worse as the years go by.
And also, if you're able to have some kind of like, I know this sounds, like a lot, but have like an escape route or a
Yeah.
backup option planned. Like, I know people that have hurricane shutters and,
Yeah,
better houses than I do, that I would go there in the event of like a really bad
exactly.
hurricane or something. But just
Have
make
some
sure it's
sort of plan.
nearby. Because you don't
Yeah.
want to be like stuck on the road with traffic and stuck there in hours
My
and hours of
mom
traffic.
my mom literally printed me out walking instructions to get to my aunt's house. That's a couple hours from me in case of emergency. That doesn't take any main roads that would be caused like stuck with traffic.
Love that for you.
So if it's as
That's
simple as that,
amazing.
it's as simple as that, you know. Another thing is people are going to be migrating to more sustainable areas.
Mm,
So, if possible, being in staying away from urban areas is a good idea, especially if you're like looking to buy a house soon or anything
mm,
like that. Because, and I know it's not always possible. At the, it feels like every area is urban these days. Like it's just so overpopulated. But you don't want to be in an area that is already populated whenever we're about to look at more people coming in, especially in a time of crisis, because then the things that you need are not going to be available to you anymore. Just try not to overthink things. Try to
mhm.
think logically instead of in a panic.
Yeah.
And, you know, do the best that you can. That's all we can do.
Yeah. I mean, these are really urgent things that we need to talk about and we need to address. But by adapting our lifestyles and by promoting sustainable practices, we can all contribute to a healthier and more resilient planet. So
Right.
let's do all we can, to help the planet and to help each other survive and adapt to all these changing environments.
And please, if you have any advice or any tips that you've learned, don't be afraid to comment, message us, whatever. I know this can be a topic that people like to argue about, and not even getting
Mhm.
into the politics of things or a religious aspect of things or anything like that. The basics
Right.
of we just want our earth to survive.
Yes,
you
exactly.
know?
And if we all work together, united in this issue, then maybe we can actually get somewhere. That's my
Yeah.
hope. So we are going to go ahead and hop into our next segment, Behind the Curtain, where we talk about
Yes.
conspiracy theories, spooky things, and just the unknown. What we're talking about next isn't necessarily a conspiracy theory because it is public. It's out there. It's been
Yeah.
declassified and proven true. But I figured we'd still keep it in this segment because it's relevant. All
Yeah.
right. So picture this: top secret experiments, mind control, and spy cats, all during the Cold War era. It's like a real life sci fi movie, but this movie actually happened. So, what the hell is MK Ultra? So, MK Ultra is the code name for a secret CIA program that was all about exploring mind control techniques. The CIA basically wanted to gain the upper hand with a truth serum during the Cold War. And they also thought that brainwashing people could be the key to unlocking secret intel. And about the truth serum, from my research, I think they were using LSD pretty much as the truth serum.
Interesting.
Yeah, because they thought it would kind of like loosen people's lips, basically, and
Yeah,
kind
because
of
you don't know
scramble
what you're
their
going to talk
thoughts.
about.
Exactly. So the government went all out with this crazy idea. They roped in scientists and they even recruited Nazi researchers, which look into Operation Paperclip if you're interested in more details on that.
Okay.
But these experiments that the government conducted, they're super messed up. They slipped unsuspecting Americans LSD like it was candy just to see how their minds would react. Which, by the
Oh,
way, the
man.
government, I heard, I'm not sure if this is true or not, but I heard that the government created LSD specifically for these experiments.
I believe
So,
that.
if
I
someone else knows
mean,
more about that, let us know in the comments. But I'm pretty sure it's accurate. I would believe it.
yeah.
Psychedelic drugs, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and electroshock therapy were some of the other techniques used on human test subjects. The program was also intended to develop an anti interrogation serum to counter the Soviet truth serum. So basically, the US government caught wind that the Soviet Union had a kind of truth serum that they were going to use in the military and use against the US. So they're
Hmm.
like, okay, let's try to get ahead of them. It's the Cold War, that's what they were doing anyways.
Yeah.
So the US tried to create their own, but in doing so, they ended up doing these horrible experiments on their own American people, which is really messed
Yeah.
up.
And not to
Um,
mention celebrities.
Wait, what do you
I've
mean?
heard I've heard that a lot of celebrities were involved in this experimentation.
Really?
Yes. There's theories out there that multiple celebrities have been, you know, involved in that.
Wouldn't surprise
Because
me.
you look at like videos whenever it shows like who was it,
Oh,
Katy
I've been like
Perry?
glitching.
Yeah, like glitching or like their like eye
Yeah.
twitch.
Yeah, that's super weird to me. I've seen some videos that I'm just like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, that's sketchy. How is that happening?
Right.
But yeah, I have seen that before, now that you mention it.
Yeah.
But so unfortunately, these experiments obviously had some tragic consequences. People suffered long-lasting psychological damage, and the worst part is, most of them had no idea what was happening to them, which is super scary to me. The
Yeah.
CIA has no proof and no documentation of consent forms. And they didn't even bother to follow up with these people after they experimented on them.
So do you
So,
have any information as far as like their proof that it happened? Not saying
Good
that I'm
question.
skeptical, but I'm
Well,
just
actually,
curious.
yeah, because there are the declassified documents
Oh, got you.
are
Okay, that's you
available
did
to
say
the
that.
public, and that's pretty much how that ended up happening. Was the documents were declassified and the public became aware of it, which I'm about to get into that.
Okay,
But we
cool.
will, side note, we will link the declassified MK Ultra documents in the
Yes, I'm gonna read
description
them too.
for anyone that wants to browse if you're curious and you want to go down a rabbit hole, because this is like a basic overview, but there's a lot more that went on and there's a lot more
Right.
detail of what the government did and how far they went
Mm-hmm.
with their human guinea pigs, which is
Right.
terrible. Um, I was reading also that it was typical not to have doctors on hand the night after the experiments, which you'd think
Oh,
you'd want to have them around to check in on them and make sure that everything's going to plan and
but
that
that's
they're
sketchy.
healthy. Very sketchy. I want, honestly, I'm kind of prone to believe that some of the people probably weren't even like real doctors that were doing these
Oh
experiments.
yeah.
But sometimes the CIA would force their victims even more drugs to help them sleep better.
Oh
So it's
God.
like, oh, you're having trouble sleeping because we're brainwashing you and we're deprogramming you and putting all these drugs into you that you didn't ask for. Oh, okay, well, here's some more drugs. Enjoy, sleep well.
This should
Like,
help.
it's
It
like,
kind of it kind of fits with big pharma in general today, honestly.
literally, exactly. And like,
Not that some
they
medical drugs aren't important. They are, but
they are. But it's to the point of where like everything else can't be an option, so big pharma
right.
can thrive basically.
Exactly.
But so the truth did eventually come out with MK Ultra as it tends to do.
Okay.
And in 1973, the US Congress launched an investigation known as the Church Committee to examine the program activities. The public was shocked, to say the least, to learn about the extent of these secret experiments because they had no idea that any of it was going on. And it might be
Yeah.
more like public knowledge now. I want to say about, a majority of the public knows about MK Ultra to some extent. But
I heard about it, but I didn't know like details.
back then they had no idea this was going on under their noses. It could have been
Yeah.
happening to their friends, their
Mm-hmm.
families, could have happened to them. Um, but guess what?
What?
Most of the MK Ultra documents were destroyed. I wonder why.
Of course they were.
Super sketchy.
Of course they were.
Um, but in 1982, four victims came out and they attempted to sue for long-lasting mental damage, which I would too.
Yeah.
One of the plaintiffs, Varel Kirk, was dosed non-stop with a variety of drugs, and soon after he attempted unaliving himself by burning and hanging. He even attempted to gnaw off one of his arms.
And it didn't happen? Like
What do you
he
mean?
survived all of that?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my
Survived.
God.
And then he went with these other three victims. I believe all four victims that sued were from the same penitentiary. They were basically prisoners in this penitentiary, and the government used them as testing subjects.
Wow.
Yeah. And then they came back and they sued them once everything came out years later.
Mm-hmm.
And they knew that they were protected. But obviously, like, if you're a victim of these experiments, you're going to deal with some psychological damage that's going to stick with you for life.
Yeah.
Like, I was reading another story about one of the victims. She was a female. I don't remember her name. But she was saying that she knows nothing about her former life. She doesn't remember her old name. She doesn't even really remember how, like, the world worked before all these experiments. She said they basically,
Wow.
like, stripped her of her past and, like, her real life and gave her a new life and a new identity. And it was really hard for her to work past that afterwards, of course.
You know what's
You know?
crazy?
Hmm.
Remember how last week I talked about Montauk experiment and how it relates to Stranger
Yeah.
Things, and this is like similar?
Mm-hmm.
In Stranger Things 11, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, um, she finds her mom that
Hmm.
was stripped from her when she was a baby.
Oh, wow.
And her mom they shocked her until she lost all of her memories.
Oh my God.
And literally,
Oh
she's
no.
like unable to talk or do anything, like function, but she's still living. And like
Yeah.
Eleven's able to communicate with her by like doing deprivation tanks.
Mm. Interesting. Because
Just
sensory
throwing that in there.
deprivation was one of the techniques the government used, or the
Yeah,
CIA used. So it's very
yeah,
interesting. I was
exactly.
also reading that obviously Stranger Things is based off of like Montauk and all of
Mm-hmm.
that, like we talked about last week. But I
Mm-hmm.
found out that there's also elements of MK Ultra in there,
Yeah, well, that's
which
probably one of
explains a
them because
lot.
thinking, like, as you're saying all these things, I'm like,
Yeah, you're like, wait a second.
yeah. And it makes me want to go get in a deprivation tank because what if I got some powers?
Dude, I've been wanting to do that for a
Let's do
long
it.
time. I've
We
been
can go
wanting
together
to.
because
All right.
they have places where it's like one room with like multiple pods in it.
Yeah, I would have to do that with more than one person because, like, what if I pass
Yeah.
out or something and I don't know, like,
See,
you
my
know what I
thing
mean?
is when I'm like, let's say I float in the pool,
Yeah.
I can't stand hearing my own breathing. So all I'm gonna hear being in that pod is like,
I love how that's your main reason for not doing a sensory deprivation tank is because of your breathing. Like,
I like I'm breathing.
you're like, I'm gonna sound like Darth Vader over here. Like, that's great. So, I have a little bonus tidbit.
Ooh,
We're pretty
okay.
much done with MK Ultra, like the overview of it. And if
Yeah.
you guys want to look more into it, I highly encourage you to look it up.
Yeah.
We'll link the documents, like I said earlier. So now we're gonna go into spy cats.
Ooh.
The year was 1966, during the height of the Cold War. The CIA was on the hunt for innovative ways to gather top
Mm.
secret intelligence. So someone came up with the crazy idea of recruiting cats as secret agents, and they called it Operation Acoustic Kitty.
What?
No joke. No joke. It's Operation Acoustic
I
Kitty.
never heard of this.
I love it.
Is that
So
where like all the spy
basically,
cat shit came from?
yes. Yeah. So
Okay.
basically, the CIA invested millions of dollars and years of research into this project. They surgically implanted listening devices and microphones inside the cats. But beyond that, they needed special training. So these spy cats went through intense espionage boot camps where they learned to sneak, eavesdrop, and even blend in with their surroundings.
Someone
So
looked at a cat and was like, "This little bitch would make a good CIA agent."
they look sneaky. I'm not gonna lie. Like I could see how someone could like come up with that idea.
Yeah,
But like I just feel like animals,
it's so
unless we're really
wrong.
talking about like dogs and maybe a few others, they're just so unpredictable. You just
Yeah,
never know. But eventually, after all this training for the spy cats, it came time for the CIA to put them to test in a real world operation. So they sent one brave cat on a mission to spy on some important looking people in a park. Super high stakes, right?
yeah.
So basically, when the spy cat was creeping closer to the target, suddenly a group of pigeons showed up.
Not on
Spy
my
cat got
turf.
distracted. Spy cat got sidetracked and started chasing the pigeons instead of gathering intel. The project was eventually discontinued because the CIA realized that cats were just too unpredictable for spy
Yeah.
work. So that wraps up MK Ultra and Spy Cats, which went on at the same time. Like we said earlier, for those that want to go down the rabbit hole even deeper, we're going to link to those documents. And if you enjoyed this trip into the mysterious world of MK Ultra and Spy Cats, hit that like button. Share this
Yes.
video with your conspiracy loving friends. So, we are going to go ahead and head into our last segment,
Yes.
Breaking the Stigma, where we talk about mental health. And today we have kind of some heavy topics that we're going to talk about.
And personal.
Um, and personal, we're going to get very personal with you guys and vulnerable. We're going to talk about eating disorders, self harm, and suicide. So,
Yes.
trigger warning for anyone watching. That is definitely going to be a part of this segment. If you feel like you can't handle that, feel free to skip this segment.
Yep.
I mean, you don't have to watch it. You don't have to put yourself through it if you feel like it'll trigger you.
Yep.
So
We
yeah, we're
just
gonna
want to
dive
raise
right into that.
awareness, share personal stories, try to present some solutions.
Yeah,
And that's
for sure.
it.
So, eating disorders.
Yes.
Um, I have a pretty long history with them.
Hmm.
I think my first one started when I was like, I want to say 12 or 13. So I
Yeah,
was
same.
very young. And it was basically because of just so much pressure by, honestly, by my parents, and then other
And
people and
societal.
society.
Yeah.
Society, of course. I remember just watching a lot of Disney Channel and basically like comparing my body to like Miley Cyrus and Selena Gomez and
Yep.
Demi Lovato. And at the time, they were like 5 years older than me and just like
Hey.
already, just and on top of that, they had different body types, they had different bone
Different
structure,
clothes.
different clothes, different
Professional
height.
makeup.
Yes. So there's like so many factors that I wish I had thought about, or I wish an adult had pointed out to me and said,
Yes.
hey, Selena Gomez is beautiful, but you
Right.
guys are very different. She's this height, she has a professional helping her, but you're beautiful too. And you guys are both beautiful in your own way. And that doesn't, just because you
Right.
guys look different, doesn't mean that only one of y'all is beautiful. And I wish someone had told me that when I was
And
younger
see, I
because,
did have someone telling me that, people telling me that, but
mm,
I just didn't believe it. So
mm, denial.
sometimes, yeah, sometimes even if you have people telling you, it doesn't make a difference because if society is showing you that that's not the truth, it kind of goes back what I was saying last week of like your loved ones, you might feel like they're just saying that because they love me and they don't want me to be sad. But
I still think that.
society, yeah, exactly. It's hard to get out of that like mindset, you know?
But it definitely doesn't help when, your parents are being just as toxic as society. Or
Right.
your friends, or, your siblings,
Yeah, the
whoever in
people
your
you're
life.
around in general, yeah.
Hmm. Because these are people that you trust and you love and you value their opinion. And,
Right.
when they have that kind of negative attitude towards you and the way you look at such a young age, of course you're going to think like, oh, I'm a monster. I'm a failure. I need to lose
Right.
all this weight at 12 years old, which we were too young. Like,
I feel
no kid
like
should have to worry about that.
right. And I feel like society today, I feel like this next generation is going to have more hope than we did. Or I
Yeah.
have more hope for this next generation, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
because it's becoming more accepted. People are showing now in society, like, it's okay to be yourself. I'm finally learning that. So we didn't have that. We didn't have like these plus size models and just
No.
society being like it's okay not to wear makeup or YouTubers like that were showing their true selves and all of these podcasts that like show their true
Yeah.
personalities. It's always been so scripted and so edited.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully nowadays besides school and mean kids, kids have something more like inspirational to look up to.
So I think the key here to avoiding an eating disorder, no matter what age you are, is learning balance when it comes to food
And self-love.
and and self-love. But balance with food makes such a difference because if you're restricting, coming from personal experience, eventually you're going to want what you can't have.
Right.
And you're depriving your body of all these calories and nutrients, so you're going to be more hungry than the average
And
person.
then you might be like me and gain more weight by forcing yourself not to eat. And then it's going to make you more depressed.
Exactly. Or you'll gain more weight or develop another eating disorder by binging
That was
and
me. I
going
like went
crazy.
back and forth. My life has been
Same.
like a constant cycle of, and I'm finally out of that. Thank God.
Same.
But
Yeah.
my life has been a constant struggle of binge eating, not eating, binge eating, not
Mhm.
eating.
Yep.
So it's hard. And some people
I
have
feel
eating
like
disorders and don't even realize it. So many
I
people do.
know because a lot of it is normalized, and another eating disorder that is normalized today that almost no one ever talks about, it's called orthorexia. And it's basically an eating disorder where you think that you're doing all like the health things and you're doing everything right. Like you're
Dieting and
drinking your
stuff.
green smoothies, you're doing your, lemon water and all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically an obsession with health and fitness and healthy eating. And
Got
that's in
you.
itself is its own eating disorder because if you let that take over your life and it's all you think
Yeah.
about and you can't enjoy a simple, I don't know, pasta, a brownie when your family
Mm-hmm.
is baking. Like I had to pretty much tell myself, okay, just try and add vegetables to every meal if you can. If you can, if you can't, it's not a
Yeah.
big deal. Try to make sure you're eating plenty of protein so that you stay full and you're getting
Eat at
nutrients.
home.
Eat at
You got
home
food in the
instead of
house.
ordering out. The food in the house is like a wilted banana and some rotten tomatoes. But once you can kind of there's so many videos on YouTube now that you can watch that are accessible where you can watch registered dietitians and nutritionists kind of
Mm-hmm.
lay out how to build your plate essentially and how to build a healthy meal.
And make it like
And
just a habit and not a diet.
exactly. You have to think of it as I'm doing this for my body because it's good for me and it
Mm-hmm.
makes me feel good and it makes me feel better. Because
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you, but when I eat some vegetables and some chicken compared to some freaking McDonald's, it makes a huge difference in my energy levels, my mood, how I feel, my bloatedness.
Which
It
we
just
will
makes such a
have
difference.
a very special guest at the end of this month speaking more about these intuitive eating tips. So I'm excited for that.
Yes, she is an actual licensed therapist, so I'm
Yeah.
very excited. There's certain things I feel like I'm not qualified for,
Same.
and I feel like having like an expert come on and kind of just give us good advice, it'll be
And
very useful
validation at the end of the day,
for
you know?
sure. For sure.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so my big problem, like you said, was depriving myself and restricting myself. I would go on these crash diets. I did I think it's called the lemonade diet. Beyonce did
I think
it
we've all done
and
it.
normalized it when she was losing weight for her from her divorce.
I don't
I
think I've
think her
ever peed and number two'd more in my life.
more. Oh my God, it's basically just lemon juice, water, and maple syrup. And that's all you're drinking
Like a whole gallon
all
of it a
day
day.
long. You're not eating anything, you're just drinking that. And it didn't taste bad, but that's not enough. And the fact that my mother let me do this at 15 years old, when my body was still developing and I still, it's so harmful. It's so
Very.
harmful. And so I do just crazy things like that. I did juice fast. I did
Yeah.
water fast even at one point,
Mm-hmm.
where I was just drinking water, not eating a thing
And
all
it's
day
okay
long.
to like if you want to fast like one day a month or do like little fast here and there, but
Yeah.
not this is going to be my diet and for weeks or months on end I'm not going to eat any solid food.
Or not doing it so you fit into a certain dress or look a certain way
No.
for a certain event because that's what I was
Exactly.
doing.
The
I was
intention
like,
behind it
"Ooh,
matters.
I gotta go to this banquet. Let me just like, lose 5 pounds by drinking just water for a week." Yeah, not a good idea. I was
Then your body
passing
probably
out in the
stored it.
hospital. Yeah. And well, not back then. So I feel like because of all the crash diets I went on, and I don't know if you feel this way too, but just all the dieting and the binging and the restricting and binging and
The
restricting,
back and forth,
that
yeah.
my body just the metabolism got fucked up pretty much, and my metabolism hasn't recovered since.
Not only
And
that,
that's
but I have like IBS
same.
and
Same.
just overall gut health is something I've been working
Yeah.
on because it's hard to repair that. It takes time, and that's like
Hmm.
your gut health is so important even to your mental,
Yes, because it's
So,
connected.
yeah.
Hmm.
So, it's that's what I'm learning is like the root to a lot of my issues health-wise.
Yeah, definitely. So that was our history with eating disorders,
Yeah.
just a brief history. And then moving into more self-harm. I
Slash
didn't
suicide
do too
awareness.
much. Yeah, I didn't do too much in that area, so I'll let you speak on that if you
Yeah,
want.
so I did
Oh. Mm-hmm.
for a couple years. And I'm not
Yeah.
speaking about this subject to bring blame to anyone in my life or make them feel guilty,
Mhm.
because I had people that cared about me. I had people there supporting me. It was all in my head and goes along with the whole societal thing. And I thought I had it so bad. Now, granted, I did go through some childhood trauma. I'm not downplaying that, which I've
Mhm.
worked hard to heal from and come a
Mhm.
long way from.
Proud of
But
you. Proud of you.
thank you. it's it's hard because not a lot of people talk about it. It was very
Mhm.
common for me and my friend group,
Mhm.
people in public school. Like, I feel like that was a big difference between me and you growing up, is you
Yeah.
were homeschooled and I had the influence of all of these public school kids that not only
Right.
was I going through stuff, they were going through it worse. And I
Mhm.
was, me being an empath, always the friend that was like there for everyone and knew all of their, at home things that they're going through. So yeah, I didn't feel alone, but we were like a whole generation of just some childhood trauma kids. And I
For
know there's
sure.
people out there that have probably never talked about it or are embarrassed, or even people that make fun of it this till this day. And I just don't think it's funny. I don't think it's a laughing matter. I joke about being emo all the time. That emo girl still lives inside of me. There's nothing wrong with that. But like, I don't like when people are like, "I'm gonna go cut myself because of this," or it's just not
Mm.
funny to me. There's still
It's not
people till this
tasteful.
day that are struggling with that. And
Yeah.
people, there's a stigma behind it of they do it for attention. Sometimes that is true. For me, it wasn't. No one knew about it. I hid it. I wore like 12 bracelets on each arm to hide it. I had plenty of people I knew in my life that did it on their legs and stuff so they wouldn't be seen. It's not always about trying to be seen or trying to get attention. Sometimes it's about not necessarily being suicidal, because that's not why I was doing it. It was more feeling numb and wanting to feel something. And at
Mm.
the end of the day, I think that's why a lot of people do it. Um, as like weird as that sounds to people who have never done it, or it could sound like that doesn't make any sense, but you never been through it, so you don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
but I just feel like there needs to be more awareness for things like that, especially
Mhm.
people that have kids. That's one of the number one leading factors that ends up to people committing suicide.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, if that would have been noticed earlier on, it wouldn't have happened. So
Mm.
that's one of the things you can look for in your loved ones or in your kids, um, to watch out for,
Yeah.
when it
Thanks
comes
for
to that
speaking on
subject.
that.
Yeah, of
I
course.
definitely didn't feel like I was qualified to
It's
talk too much
okay.
about it, but I definitely wanted, you to speak as comfortably as you were able to about it.
And it's nice having
Um,
like someone that didn't go through that also speak their opinion on it, because
mhm.
not a lot of people feel comfortable talking about it regardless.
Yeah. My um what I thought the reason was, I didn't think it was for attention. I thought maybe sometimes it was like attention, but as in a cry for help attention.
Yes. And it
And
can
then
be for sure.
I also saw it as kind of like um like you have so much going on in your brain and your mind and your
Like an
emotions.
outlet.
You have no control over that, but you do have control over your body.
Yeah.
Therefore, you're harming your body because you
And
have
it
control
could,
over it.
and there probably is people that feel that way.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's
Definitely.
just my perspective from someone who
It's
didn't do it
definitely
and
like an
didn't go through
emotional
it, but
outlet, if that makes sense.
yeah,
People have different
definitely.
ones. I'm
Right.
thankful that, and I'm not trying to say I'm thankful I took that route, but I'm thankful that I didn't get caught up in like drugs or
Yeah.
anything like along those lines, because that's where a lot of people head, when it
Hmm.
comes to not having an emotional outlet or feeling numb when it comes to emotions. Like,
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. So,
um,
talking about suicide, the elephant in the room, it's a
yeah,
difficult subject to talk about because it's very heavy and it's very sobering because there's so many people that even if you've never had a suicidal thought, you've had a family member or a friend or someone you know that has committed suicide.
yeah,
And I feel like it's at this point in the world, it's personal to probably almost all of us. to some extent.
Yeah. It
And
should
a
be.
lot of time it should be, yeah. A lot of times I've noticed these suicidal thoughts can be intrusive. And it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't necessarily mean that you're suicidal
No.
because I've dealt with the two opposite ends of the spectrum. I've dealt with, having suicidal thoughts but not necessarily being suicidal. They're just popping in my head without me controlling it or thinking it. Because I'm
Right.
depressed or because I'm have heightened anxiety or I'm going through something.
Right.
But then there's the other end of the spectrum where these suicidal thoughts are coming in because you actually are considering killing yourself.
Right.
And that's also something I've dealt with. And I've always been the type to be too scared to actually do it. And I
Mm-hmm.
truly feel like that's the only reason I haven't, because there were just so many times where I had the opportunity and I was alone and I was ready,
Mm-hmm.
but I just couldn't do it because I was
Right.
just too scared. And, I think about these other people that might not be too scared to do it. They might get to that level of desperation. And that's
Yeah.
really sad to think about. It's like, okay, well, how can we help people before they get to that place in their
And
life?
then you have these hotlines that are not helping the situation.
Oh my, I have a story on one of those. You know my story.
Yeah.
I called one of the hotlines on the
Not because
suicide
you were
hotline.
having those thoughts, just to clarify. You were going
Yeah, I
through a
wasn't
hard
having those.
time, but you needed therapy and
Yeah,
couldn't afford it.
exactly. So I'm like, oh, I just call the suicide hotline. They'll help.
Right.
It's free. So I call them and I ended up being on hold for like, God, I don't know how long, like 30 minutes to 40 minutes. And then as soon as someone finally like started talking and I started talking with them, the call got disconnected. And I couldn't help but think, what if I was someone that was actually
On the
about to
verge,
kill
yeah.
myself? What if I had the pills in my hand or the gun towards my head? Like,
And then didn't you call back and wait again and then they like put you on hold?
yep,
They're like,
that's
"Oh yeah,
exactly what
one
happened.
second. I just have to take this call and put you on hold." Like,
And I
are
literally
you
told them that we had
serious?
gotten, I literally told them that I had already been on hold. We got disconnected. I'm crying. I'm sobbing. I'm hysterical. I just want to talk to someone that's not a friend or a family member because I didn't have a therapist at that time and I didn't know what to do.
You were
And
going through
it
like one of the
broke,
hardest things in your life.
yeah, and it broke my heart just thinking about the other people that could be calling the suicide hotline and them also getting disconnected but their situation being a little more serious and
Yeah.
life-threatening than mine.
Yeah.
So, something to think about.
That's something
I
that needs to change. There needs to be more resources available.
And it's hard because I understand like these suicide hotlines, they're run by volunteers
Yeah.
and people that have good hearts
It's
and
not
they're
their
volunteering their
fault.
time.
It's the
No, but
system put in place.
there needs to be better systems.
Hmm.
There needs to be something else.
Especially when
And
it comes to this matter. So I feel like we covered a lot of heavy stuff today, but
yeah,
overall, it felt great being able to be a little more vulnerable with you guys.
yeah.
We're so thankful for all of the support we've been receiving and all of the subscribers we've gotten on YouTube.
So grateful for you guys.
Yes, seriously. We hope that this can help someone. We'll try to tag some good, resources. Hopefully, we can find some new updated ones. And as of that, I feel like today was a great podcast. And
Yeah.
if you want to give us a little extra support or you're looking to know where we need the most support in this moment, I feel like we're looking to get some more viewers on Spotify so we can grow that platform as well. As I mentioned last week, we're only going to be posting our full podcast episodes in Spotify, and
Mhm.
we'll post a segment or two as short videos on our YouTube each week as well. For people that, don't have time for the whole podcast or they prefer one segment over the other, that can be fun as well. So,
Exactly. But yeah, thank you guys again so much for listening and watching and whatever you're doing. We
yeah.
appreciate y'all and we will see y'all next week.
Yes.